You're sitting on your desk, busy away at work, and lean back a bit to distance yourself from the chaotic workload that is in front of you. Whether you're staring up at the ceiling or out into a window view, you zone out as your mind wanders far off into a distant space of the past and or future. Or perhaps you're sitting in your car on autopilot mode, driving through the streets, daydreaming into places far off. Whatever you're doing is, this transient state is what is known as mind wandering, and is something we all engage in. In fact, the data indicates that most of our minds wander 47% of the time. Before we dig deep into what happens to our mind when it wanders, make sure to hit that subscribe button as it really helps the channel out. And we're dedicated to educating more on brain behavior in business, helping people mind the golden mind. Also known as stimulus-independent thought, it is when your brain drifts off into an ephemeral space where you run through the memories of the past or simply imagine the ways of a potential future. Some suggest that mind wandering is when we specifically are thinking of tasks unrelated and stimulus-independent thoughts. Researchers McMillan, Kaufman, and Singer have noted that mind wandering itself can be broken down into 3 types: positive constructive daydreaming, guilty fear of failure, poor attentional control. Bad for us as we dwell over the regrets, losses, and negatives of what has passed. This is most likely in reference to the second type of mind wandering. In addition, there are studies that note that we may be more prone to mistakes when we let our mind wander as well. In one experiment, scientists to measure something called the feedback error-related negativity, or ERP for short. An ERP component gave the researchers some idea of how closely the participants were monitoring the accuracy of responses performing a task. When looking at brain scans, the researchers found that ERP dropped when participants were mind wandering, suggesting that the act itself negatively affects our ability to monitor our performance, and thus adjust our behavior and make mistakes. Mind wandering being such a common trait, and it being quite negative on us, why does it happen? One hypothesis to the function of mind wandering is believed to be for cognitive control. This is the process in which our brains try to regulate adaptive behavior. Kurzban and Company in 2013 proposed that cognitive control goes through a set of mental computations that hypothesize the experience of effort in a given task. It determines the value of that task and other nearby tasks and does a sort of cost-benefit analysis that weighs the overall effort required for the reward received. This at large could potentially be our brain's way of preventing us from doing things we don't want to do. Our minds, after all, are limited in attentional resources. Mind wandering thus helps us mentally unplug from having to constantly be on, and thus saves us from burning out all our efforts into things it identifies as having lesser value. As Julia Kam, a cognitive neuroscientist at University of Calgary states, in letting your mind wander, it potentially frees up attentional resources and also the structured way of thinking that limits creative outputs. Despite arguments that mind wandering can be bad for your brain, on the flip side, there is other research that indicates that there are some advantages to it, especially if done deliberately. For one, it helps us engage in divergent creative thinking. Divergent thinking refers to the notion of letting our minds free flow into thinking of new ideas and solutions. With this type of thinking, some studies have shown that people who let their minds wander were able to feel a boost in creativity. During any mind-wandering process, we engage in the default network of our brain, which research indicates is closely linked to creativity itself. Although there has been plenty of research pointing to the fact that negative moods were a result of mind-wandering, it's also just one side of the story. In fact, the type of mood people were in depends on the type of content they are letting their minds wander off to. And even more so, the mood in which a person is in at that time can largely influence what type of mind wandering they actually do. For example, if you're feeling down and dwelling on what ifs of the past, then the thoughts you engage in will inherently be negative, further perpetuating that mood. This study suggests that mind wandering is not something that is inherently bad for our happiness. Sadness is likely to lead the mind to wander, and that mind wandering is likely to be emotionally negative. Finally, mind wandering can also be a form of taking mental breaks. There has been countless research that shows us that micro breaks have a positive relationship with productivity and performance. In fact, tiny breaks are so impactful on the well-being of our brain, they've been shown to improve concentration, shift perspectives, and reduce stress. With all of this being said, it's no wonder that mind wandering itself, if done correctly, can improve work performance, as long as we do it in moderation. As Matt Killingsworth, PhD of Robert Wood Johnson Health and Society scholar, once wrote, "A lot of us spend a lot of time trying to optimize the objective reality of our lives, but we don't spend a lot of time and effort trying to optimize where our minds go." We shift our focus and attention closer to where we want it to go. As such, make sure to watch the video on the left to learn about how to train our brain for better attention, and please subscribe to the channel to help us make more content like this.